I went through her chart and summarized the types of visits that she had to the office. And if you forgive my reading for a moment, I'll read them to you. She was here 3 times for annual well checks, 1 time for a stomach ache, 1 time for vaginitis, 1 time for a bruised nose from a fall at a local market, and 21 times for cold, sinusitis, ear infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, hay fever, possible asthma. Pretty wide spectrum of generally allergy and respiratory system associated problems.
So he provides quite a comprehensive set of circumstances, and he talks about her falling on her nose at an alfalfa market, right? That's something that's kind of an injury. Does he mention anywhere about the golf club incident? And let's be clear, Patsy did bring JonBenet to him to address that, right, for a checkup. Does he mention anything about a scar on her left cheek? Anyway, let's go through that.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. And so, although Dr. Beuf deals with a slew of colds and whatnot, what about the nasty accidents that go well beyond that? Well, let's deal with those now. May 8th, 1995, JonBenet fell on her nose from Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. So we've got to go away from the medical records to get this information. Well, certainly away from what he's saying, certainly at this point. Lauren Schiller writes, at Alfalfa's food market on May 8, 1995, JonBenet fell and landed on her nose. It was not broken. 7.5 months later, this is now approximately Christmas, 1995. Same thing happens again. JonBenet fell on her nose. She tripped and hit her head above her left eye. So I guess more appropriately, she fell on her face. Then guess what happened not long after that? JonBenet fell and bent the nail back on her 4th finger. That was May 1996, right? In March 1996, JonBenet was coughing a lot, and 2 months later, she bent the nail back on her 4th finger of her left hand in another fall. And then there's the golf club incident, which predates all of these. JonBenet hit in the face August 1994. And how does Dr. Beuf deal with this? On October 5th, 1994, when JonBenet showed up at the doctor's office for a checkup, she had a scar on her left cheek. She'd been hit accidentally by a golf club when the family was in Charlevoix. Judith Phillips said that Patsy said it wasn't accidental. A week later, a plastic surgeon in Denver was consulted. Now, you'd imagine that Dr. Beuf had something to do with referring Patsy to this plastic surgeon. There's no mention of this at all in any of the interviews that Dr. Beuf gave, certainly none that I could come across. And this is the part where we need like quite a deep boom and a lot of circles sort of around this particular item. Because it's interesting to note in his own medical records, Dr. Beuf records the golf incident, Golfgate. He records it, but he neglects to say who did it. Who hit JonBenet? And this was revealed during an interview with Diane Sawyer. So Sawyer says, once again, Dr. Beuf, JonBenet's pediatrician, who says, in 27 visits over 3 years, wow, is it 27 or is it 30 or is it 33? Those goalposts are also shifting. The only injuries he saw were the usual childhood accidents. Are these usual childhood accidents? According to his notes from October 1994, Beuf said, has a good appetite, doesn't like much variety, amount of TV she watches, very cooperative behavior, loves to draw, scar on her cheek from being hit with a golf club. And if a parent had been involved in that, then we certainly would have jumped on the situation. Now, I don't know if that is from his actual report. It seems like he's ad-libbing that part. And then he writes this. This needs to be circled. I did not write down who had been the hitter. Why not? Also, a little hint is how the number of visits changes in various interviews. Now, when you cross-reference these injuries starting in 1994 but continuing through 1995 with JonBenet's pageant schedule, you'll notice JonBenet's last pageant is in July 1994 in Charlevoix. Then the following month she's struck in the face. And then she doesn't do another pageant until October 1995, more than a year later. That is a significant break in JonBenet's streak of 9 pageant titles. That is a significant setback to her career as a child beauty queen, this thing that happened where she was struck in the face. Miss Colorado Sunburst is also the only pageant JonBenet does in 1995. She only does one pageant in 95. She does several in 94 and 96. In 1996, the pageants go up a gear, starting in July, August, and then unusually she does 2 in December. She would have done 3 if she didn't get sick. It would have been 3 pageants that last December of her life, except JonBenet was too sick to appear in the pageant on December 12th. And I think JonBenet was also in the Boulder Christmas Parade that year while her parents were in New York. And then at the end of that month, JonBenet loses her life. So I'm kind of curious when Dr. Beuf says unambiguously and comprehensively and with 100% certainty there was never any evidence of prior abuse. Is he right? I mean, objectively speaking, is it true? There's not any evidence whatsoever. Well, I think there's a possibility of evidence here. I mean, isn't the golf club injury which Judith Phillips says she was told was deliberate? That's how I understand it. That's how she understood it. Isn't that potential evidence of something? How can you say there's never any evidence? How can you make such an absolute statement? Now, I'm not saying it's evidence. I'm saying it's possibly something. And I mean, when you've got a police investigation and it's look where we are today, it's unsolved. You've got to look at things that could be possibilities, which is why the police asked John and Patsy about it extensively. But it seems like the doctor wasn't very much help directly to the police. I don't know if he spoke to them. The impression I get is in terms of that information, he didn't seem to want to talk about it. It was client-patient privilege or something. Now, although you could say it's potential evidence, and I believe it's incorrect and careless of the doctor not to even bring this up during a high-profile police investigation, but it doesn't mean if it's potentially evidence that it is evidence. It just means it could be. Now, it should also be noted when Dr. Beuf was interviewed by Paula Woodward, he made some pretty global statements. You know, he said there was never any hint of SA, but then he added to that. He said, I didn't see any hint of emotional or physical you-know-what. And I have to say, something like bedwetting can be a sign of that sort of thing. He also said this, when you talked with the police, did they ask you about SA of JonBenet? Beuf, yes, of course they did. Woodward, what did you tell them? Beuf, I told them absolutely categorically no. There was absolutely no evidence, either physical or historical. Now, so he obviously did speak to the police, but it seems like he didn't want to be officially questioned, you know, like at police headquarters. I just don't know the answer to that. Steve Thomas seems to suggest that. I guess we don't know one way or the other. But it is also interesting that in October 1994, when Dr. Beuf learned of this scar to JonBenet's face, Patsy was also asked to fill out a developmental questionnaire. But there's also something else. Dr. Beuf also treated Burke. And how was Burke's health? So I'm not going to take it further than that, but we'll deal with that in the next episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.